it very often. It's very disarming, and it's a whole different league. It's a hidden. It's our hidden. Use it as like our secret weapon. I was once on a panel, and it became so complicated. It was a panel of two other, the Reform Rabbi and some woman professor from Israel. And it got so intellectual, it made me sick, because it was like dry, and it was Friday night, and we were asked if we were stranded on an island and you were given 3 things to take with you. You could only have 3 things with you. What would you have with you? Texts, songs, whatever you want. So this one was quoting Moby Dick, the Reform Rabbi. She was quoting some Dead Sea Scrolls. And so I came with, my idea was, I was going to take something from Tanya and something from Samach Vov. That was my 3 things. But then
only 2. Samach Vov, Tanya.
No, and the pasuk Karve Lecha. Yeah, the Tanya is based on it. But I was starting with the pasuk. I was going to teach them something. That's what I would survive with. Then I really got so dry, so I decided, forget about the Samach Vov. Not forget about it. I'm not going to use it right now. I decided I'm going to sing Shamil. I closed my eyes, I started singing. I said, that's what I would take with me. And I'm telling you, it's gewaldig.
Wow.
Afterwards, everyone, they said, so there's any questions from the audience? They said, yeah, we want Rabbi Jacobson to sing the song again. Actually, that's what happened. And it was a different league.
That's like that story.
You have to do that because you get so,
You explain the song to me?
I told briefly the story. I said the story is about being on an island and connecting, I'm just telling you, whenever you're in a place, don't be embarrassed. You want to share a nigun. It's a very powerful tool.
Great story.
So that's it. 3 lines you got today.
3 lines? I got today, yeah.
Inside 3. The ima yesha kein shabba be'esis had a bedibur be'eser naila be'eser. So even though before they come into letters, the is bedibur be'eser, is much greater. The naila be'eser, much higher. So it's 2 things, Libui and Ili. It's like Kamus and Echos. Much more. Like Magadlu Masech and Marabu Masech. Marabu is Libui, Naila is a higher level. Aval Ein Zeh B'Bchinas Tfisa. It's not graspable. That's the key. So the Eir is higher and greater. In other words, the other side of the coin is that the Seichel without Machshava is higher than Seichel and Machshava. Because Machshava right away defines and limits it. Eir without a Keli is always more intense and a higher level and more and more of it than in containers. But it's not graspable. Now this is a critical point because, as I said before, from a godly perspective, who says you need to grasp things? But we were created in a world where we need to grasp things. We need to hold on to them. We need to contain them. So that's simply the way it is.
That's ultimately shlemus, though, on another level. If you want to talk with Mila, that God is not lacking that shlemus, it's fine. But ultimately, there's a level. We live in a world, not inside us, in this reality, that it's a lack of shlemus. And there's no, it can't be expressed.
Is it a question or a statement?
Whatever you want.
No, I think it's a very good point. Yeah. But listen, the point is you could say Dir B'Tachtenim, that God desired Dir B'Tachtenim, means He wanted something ungraspable to become graspable, to express the inexpressible, if you want to put it that way. So ultimately, the goal is to express in Machshava Dibra Ma'aseh that which is inside that's unexpressed. Because ultimately, that's the interface. The Chochmas Tema is going to be the bridge between the divine and Chochma Gluya, and Machshava is ultimately the bridge between the inner and the outer. So that's. And all the time what we're dealing here is bringing worlds together. And remember, the enemy of all of this is the static state of human complacency. We just stay where we are, we've got couch potatoes. You look at a newborn child, a young child, crawling around, they're always alive. They don't need even stimulation. They're stimulated by existence. That type of idea that the Neshama is rotching and shuv and constantly moving, that slowly what starts happening is our spirit gets locked up and we become material creatures. And materialism, by definition, is dead. It's not dead now, it's going to be dead soon. In other words, it's like the Rabbi Chaya says, Kol atinuk mishanelet, a child from its birth is already beginning to dry up. Masculine salvage, right. He's beginning to age.
You can see that's what the Rebbe Shab is doing. He's actually constantly
Absolutely.
searching for that. He's constantly
And the Rebbe was
trying to...
the Rebbe was like that. The Rebbe was like...
No, but this you see the journey.
To me, when I saw the Rebbe's by Fabrengas going on now, it was like a battle against our complacency all the time. Forget about the details of what was said. It was just this, like, relentless, not giving in to the, everything is nice and good, and let's move on. It was this type of. He just published what he said that he just said. What did I just see? The guy wrote that the Rebbetzin told somebody. That the Rebbe said when it comes to dollars, everybody lines up. When it comes to Fabrenga, he makes with his hand, everybody sings.
Yeah.
But when he asks that people should learn Torah, the lines don't show up. Anyway, but point being is, the bottom line is that even though it's there, it's ain't b'chinas tefisa. Like you see, for me it's interesting now, I would go back to look even, does he use the word tefisa before in the context of Kalim? Because like what he's really doing here is explaining the purpose of Kalim in a much deeper way than he spoke about before. Why? That's because the Heder Hagbala Se'er, how would you translate that? The opposite of lack of definition, defined energy, that doesn't allow it to be grasped. Can't grasp it. The Chol Tfisu Ha'ideh Hagbala Se'er Shein Haktzavis Commissions Bar Leil Perek Rishon follow. So, like we explained earlier, 251, chapter 251.
The negation of any.
Yeah.
But the Or has to make the Keli first. It's like a singularity becoming a duality. I mean,
Yeah, that's correct. Okay, so he says now like this. Chol Tfisa, this is an important rule in the parentheses. Everything, the Rebbe Rashab doesn't leave any stone unturned. Because you could argue, maybe you can grasp something without definition. So he says no. That's what he has in the parentheses. To grasp it means you have to have limited tools. You grasp it through its edges, through its parameters, through its defined edges, defined sides, like he explained earlier. I'll give you an example, like the blitz, like the... Yeah.
Obviously, it's not. You can call it a Ruckus Haseichel, not
No, but he's calling of Ruckus Haseichel because that's the example of...
the context of...
If he just said Chochmah, you would not get the second. So it's like, Havrok is like a lightning bolt, like the bolt of Seichel. How would you say Havrok in English?
A eureka moment.
Havrok is a burst. No, more than a Havrok is... Like what he said before, about a Bekiah. Havrok and Bekiah are similar. A split. It's like it's more than a split. Havrokas Seichel is a flash of Seichel. A flash of Seichel, of intelligence. When it flashes the idea, it's not yet grasped. Because it's not limited. As soon as you grasp it, you're already defining it.
I don't mean to sidetrack on it if it's not the time for this,
that's
but once you have a flash, before you develop it, the fact that you consciously realize you had a flash, isn't that already a ball in its face?
Yeah, you're breaking it in terms, but he's speaking, but it's not the tfisa that remains with you. You want to break it into parts, it would be like this. We probably have thousands of ideas that don't even go into Bina. They just disappear. So it's like a flash of lightning goes right back. The second you had the flash, but later you can't recall it. You can't usually recall it or retrieve it, which is a sign that it really had. Yeah, the fact that you felt it, some expression, but remember, expression could be limited. How many times you start saying something and then you say, "What was I saying?" and you can't even remember. So of course, by the moment you had it, that's why it's very important to write things down. When you write it, what you're doing is you're giving exactly what you're saying. You're creating tfisa of something that don't ever take for granted. I mean, this happens to me just Friday. I said something. This I'll remember, and I have pretty good memory. And then I couldn't remember for the life of me.
Could that be because of
Then finally I remembered. Suddenly it pops into your head. 1 second. So I wrote it down right away, and that changes it.
Could be because of age.
Could be the,
Not you, I'm talking about
could be the food.
What did I do to you that I
No.
Why, do you see signs? I mean, like,
Don't be worried, don't worry,
Hey,
tomorrow you forget you said it.
Myself too. At 30 years old, you don't have it, maybe at 50.
Moshe. We both sat at the feet of the great man who taught us that age doesn't make a difference.
Okay, never happened again, you're right?
And by the way,
At least that you remember.
no. I hope if I only remember that, I'll be happy. You know what I mean?
Someone's time for a nigga.
It's Rashi in Parsha B'Chukei say answers this question. He talks about the erchin, about people, their value. So he says men, when they're younger, they're more valuable than women from a workforce level, because they work there. But as they get older, a man's value goes down, a woman's value goes up. And he says, Rashi brings from the Gemara, that the men, Talmidei Chacham, as they get older, their minds get sharper. People are not Talmidei Chacham when they get older, their mind gets stupider. And they say, when an older woman in the house is a gem, and an older man in the house is a pain in the... Rashi doesn't use that expression, but basically...
Men still retain a higher value.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, but the men still retain a higher value, they just go down closer to where the old women are.
No, actually,
I think they're lower than the old.
Lower value.
Lower.
Yeah,
doctor, who's Yeah, your wife is right, you're
Ultimately,
wrong.
they come equal or not?
Woman is more.
It's more?
She's,
They become absolute. I know about
these fragile male egos can't handle that. Yeah, your value's going down.
That's not the alarm.
If they're common value, it's another story. That's why you go to Tefillah scale.
No.
Did you explain, when you broke into your niggun and Shamil, I can't get over this one. Did you say something that night with the reform rabbi and the professor? Did you, before you sang it, you said as an introduction, or you just broke into it?
I said my third thing is a niggun, and I'd like to sing, and I started
You said
singing.
two things. You said Korov Alecha.
Yeah, we went, it was like first one, I went, we all went, each one gave our first one, then each one gave our second one, then came the third one, so that's what I did. Yeah, it was gewaldig.
And that was the one they wanted to show.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a famous story about the Alter Rabbi when he admits.
That's where I take it from, exactly. They start saying Tamuruk. By the way, this idea with the niggun I stole from the Alter Rebbe. It's complete
Famous
plagiarism.
story about this.
That he was in Minsk. He gave a drasha to Shklov, I think. Shklov. He gave a drasha. Then it's gesagt, Tamuruk. The Rebbe said to put him Tavshin Chai.
They look like Sri Lankan monks.
Right, exactly. Now, I feel bonded with the Alter Rebbe. We both had to do with Sri Lankan monks. And then so he said, Tamuruk, Kitei Vavaya, Versuchten Zet. And the Rebbe is good. The Rebbe sang it in the tune, in Purim Tavshin Chai. And they said hundreds went with
What
it.
parsha?
Purim Tavshin Chai. Classic, it's a tape. And hundreds went with him. So I always thought to myself, if he had sung this without saying the Dvar Torah, I don't know if hundreds went. He said the Dvar Torah and the Niggun. That was the key. So that,
Oh, I thought I always heard the story. He broke immediately into the niggun.
I think he spoke first.
No,
it's-
the whole.
he said something.
Russia, there's a whole.
Yeah, there's for sure a drasha.
Yeah.
And then there was the...
It was a drasha
Yeah,
first?
yeah. I understand from the story that a lot of people who didn't understand things were able to understand after they read the meaning. But there's a drasha.
Yeah.
Wow.
Listen, I was too young to hear the Rebbe teaching those Nigunim, but I heard from people who were there.
So that just
That
shows
was like divine moments.
That just shows you how important into a Hasidic upbringing a niggun is. And you can't almost like not
Of
it's
course.
vertical.
The thing is, you want a Nigun after the little seichel, like the Rebbe once told somebody who got drunk Purim, he says, you have to have Yoda before you get the Adalis. That's where Chachmas Tema meets Chachma Gluya. You can't get the Chachmas Tema without the...
This week,
yes.
kind of mitzvah from Hamad Liyoda, that's fucking Yoda.
Yeah. Okay, so wow. So this Avrach is saying, "Nein, bizar." Har je is, my Avrach saying, "Begin to say, "Begin to say, mugbo." This is also, if you want to really spell it out bluntly, this is the paradox of life. As soon as you express it, as soon as it's tangible, it's no longer the pure reality.
True reality.
The true reality. As when it's a true reality, it's not expressible. That's the big dilemma. And that's what the bridge is here, obviously. You want to bridge the two. Maybe that's why nigun is so powerful, because the words can express. The nigun goes to a deeper place.
The word would limit it, the word would limit it to the
So Harya Esis HaMachshava Magbilim Esa'er. So the letters of Machshava, Magbilim, define, limit, contain, confine, all these words are correct. The energy, which on its own is unbridled and undefined. Not undefined, period. It's not the etzem undefined. It's undefined from the world of graspability. Is that a word?
It is now.
Okay, all this is machshava.
Doesn't let go.
What's next to this?
Doesn't let go.
The thoroughness is unbelievable. And even that parenthesis blew me away. You have to explain that l'cheda tfisa, you could say maybe you could be for something without ksavas. He says no, it's also not possible. It doesn't leave, like does not leave any loophole here. Okay, but this is all machshava. This is still it's asius. So he started like this. Remember, he says that the lula asius machshava. So he says sak levush ala seichel. Avol l'kol mokem. Nevertheless. Machshava ari agilu hu rak la'atzmei. The gili of machshava is only to yourself. So with all this definition, l'gabe da'er, it's still only to you. Okay, that's that. Eisis adibur. So that's going to be as he's going to explain primis hakeli, the dogma for primis hakeli, shema toya, what it is, not what it does. But eisis adibur heina magalim alazulus. The words of the letters of speech, they already revealed to another. The fact that they reveal further out, that means that their aces, they're more tangible, they're more magushim, they're more defined, they're more tangible, more concrete. Shemalimim, you see these words in English are very important, because you got to get the right word. It's not kshama, we all know what it means, but it's important to you translate it, forces you to really get it. Concrete, tangible. Kshomi Yeser. Shemaylimim, they conceal, because they conceal, or magbilim, and they define, and they limit, esa'er, the energy, light. See, energy is the right word here. To the extent that it can be revealed to another. So in other words, the idea itself, the intelligence itself, without any aces, is not expressed at all, not to yourself. Machshava is already containers, but they're subtle containers, not so much hakshama. So they're not yet shaped in a tangible way, but they're there. They're containers for sure, because it's expressed. You're aware of it. You're conscious of it. And Dibur makes the containers are even more tangible. Still not as tangible as Maisa, which he's not going to discuss here because it's not relevant.
Point being
is that the more tangible, the less energy, and the more expressed, the more you have to. Yeah. Let's put it this way. No. For example, what's the example I wanted to use? I wanted to use an example of two containers of how you tools, two instruments, one more subtle, one less subtle, of how you draw something. How you do something. Okay. I mean, you can see maybe by using dentist examples not so good because we don't like dentists. But you see sometimes tools you use. One you use, let's say, to get to a more subtle place, and one you use is more, when you need something more blunt.
Laser surgery compared to conventional.
Yeah, that could be. Okay, so there's Geshama.
Gili at all without ISIS?
No. He says, Lo yesh shum gili er seichel klal. That's the words.
Seichel, that's understood, but the Gili order? Yes, sir.
We're talking about seichel. What are you referring to? Without aces, there's no gili.
You got a new thought, this face shine. That's already
like the metzach, like you spoke earlier. Okay, it's a good question. I don't think that's aces there, but it's definitely there's some keli. It's little. I mean, he used the expression there was a pekia there. Kiyas ha'er metzach. Yeah, but that's not this what he's saying. It's definitely not as concrete as this. I wouldn't call that aces. But something, some expression. I mean, that's all you can say. You know.
Even seichel before it goes to
The
machshava.
Yidua,
I mean, according to what you're saying, even the seichel before it's expressed in machshava, before when it doesn't have anything, isn't the fact that it's called seichel a form of tefisa already? It says
everything is relative. I told you, as soon as it's air outside of atzmus, you're already talking.
Okay.
So everything is relative.
Yeah.
That, you know.
They say Barak Abavik is a burst of flash, I think was the word.
You said flash, burst.
Barak Abavik, each one.
Yeah. Pekia we said was what,
You always
bursting
say
through,
flash
piercing
inside.
through. Pekia is
Yeah, it's a
piercing.
flash inside.
Avraka is a burst,
Flash.
a flash of intelligence.
Flash of insight.
Yeah, flash of
Like
insight.
lightning frach. The word is rach, the same root. How do you say lightning in the Hebrew? It's the same root.
Yeah, Barak Hamavik, yeah, you do say that.
It's the same
You do, I have this by
lightning flash.
Machshava L'Dibur, now he's going to explain. And it's known the difference between thought and speech. The Machshava, Hulavush HaMiyuchad, the Machshava is a garment that is attached. L'Dibur Hulavush HaNifrid. And Dibur is a garment that's detached. Commission is Baralel Perek Reish Samar Gimel. As we learned earlier, chapter 263. That I remember. We learned it here. Yeah. And now he's going to bring it back to Primis HaKelim. Well, let me just explain that. We already explained it, but just to reiterate. Machshava is a levush hamiyuchad, because first of all, you're always thinking, whereas Dibur, you're not always speaking. Some people are always speaking, but you don't have to be always speaking. Second thing is Machshava is closer to the idea than Dibur is. Dibur is a step away. So that's what it's called levush hanifrid. It would be the equivalent of, in garments we don't really have that. Sometimes I think
skin and skin as opposed to
sometimes skin as opposed to a real like a shirt. So now he's going to bring it back. The same thing is with the inner container, that the Shagabala, its confinement, its definition, and its revelation is only to itself. Remember, he's making the case here that the main part of the container that connects and united with the ayin of the air is Primis HaKeli. So Machshava is an excellent example for that.
Right.
Because the Machshava, which is Kelim, Eishis of Machshava is the Kelim Eishis, and that is united with, like the Levush HaMiyuchad, with the energy, like the Primis HaKeli. The Chetzenis HaKeli, who Shemagbil L'Gaba Biyah, has a B'chinas Gvul, Nivdal. And the outer part of the container that we spoke before, remember the functionality?
Yeah.
That it creates the worlds. How air inside the kelim, like he said, that hu levad b'keich, he says that atzmos, the keich, that iu v'garmu yechad, that by the kelim are one with the air with atzmos. So through the kelim, abayhen v'ayadan, he creates. So the act of creation outside of Atzilus into Biyah, that is the outer container, like the Dibur, which is Nivdal.
You can even say it in Machshava itself. There's a part of Machshava that grasps its conscious thought and say, "Well, there's a Machshava that you're going to use now to."
You could break it into that, but
saying it's a Kelim. I'm saying, you're saying that.
yeah, but he's calling it Machshava and Dibur in this context.
Okay.
Basically, really, in this context, Maisa would be the actual creation of Biyah, and Primis Achetzenis Kelim and Atzilus is Machshava and Dibur. That's the way he's explaining it. Now like this. Now he's going to go into something he spoke about in the previous chapter, which adds to the whole dimension here. I just wanted to say this. He said, another point here is that the Primis HaKeli, like Machshava, the confinement is only to yourself. And the Hagbala of the Chetzenis HaKelim is Hagbala L'Gaba Biyah. In other words, in Machshava, the language here. Okay, he's going to explain this now in the next lines. What's bothering me is that the machshava that you know it, but no one else does. So it's not even revealed to outside of you.
But your actual.
The chitzein sakela shemag b'legabe biyah. So there's an expression outside.
Does that mean that it's like already thinking of words to
Usually it's used the other way around. Usually you try to say machshava is it's limited to everyone outside of you, but to you, you know it. Here he's really saying something more, that in machshava it's limited also, but it's a limitation within yourself.
Right. That's
And
the concept.
dibur is a limitation
That goes in.
that it's expressed outside. Machshava b'chlal doesn't express it. So in other words, if there was no chitzenius kelim, there'd be no biyah. There'd be no lower worlds, because it would be machshava. You'd be thinking to yourself. Dibur allows it to express. So now he's going to say bavon like this. V'hinei ragam the closing hagbal the kelm datzil surak mashamag l'chutz latzil is. So he's like asking a question. We know, and this we learned earlier, that the hagbala of the kelim of Atzilus is not a hagbala in Atzilus. It's only hagbala outside of Atzilus. So here's the question here. We just established that the kelim, as soon as there's a kelim, even premise a kelim, it's already a defined, contained state, right? Even to yourself. But it says in places that the whole Hagbala of Atzilus is not Hagbala in Atzilus. It's Hagbala only outside of Atzilus.
What does it mean, Hagbala in it?
He's going to explain that it's not really a mukbal in Atzilus. He's going to explain an example with a hand, that you can write endlessly. So the Hagbala is only outside of the hand, but the power within, when in the power to write, you have no limit. It's limitation. And then he's going to answer that in that itself there's also a limitation that's relative. We'll talk about it in a moment, but let's answer the question first. You understand what he's saying? Right? There's no gvul yet. So the chayr, it's not the mashal is not fitting here. The mashal is there is a gvul. When you're thinking, you already have a gvul. Not just dibur. Even when you're thinking, there's a gvul, but even within you.
When did we say there was not a gvul? Previously, we were just now.
He's saying b'chlal. It said in the previous Maimorim, and it doesn't matter. He didn't say it here. He says it
When you
earlier.
pray for something, is automatically a gvul, no? I mean, up and sit, would that be?
It has to be a fool. Because if you have Eses Felis and Atzilus, the fact that you have Esther is a fool.
Oh, no go there.
It shows not just the old trick. On the one hand it is, on the other hand it's not. I mean, we certainly have said that the
beginning of the
way
problem.
back before it's either.
No gavul, we just said
The answer is, of course, that's the answer. But he's trying to understand the difference. The fact of the matter is, however, the gavul and biyah is not like the gavul and Atzilus.
Right.
That's the question. What's the difference between Esses Spheres of Atzilus and Esses Spheres of biyah? That's really.
It's a potential for
The
gvul.
area of
So that's really what he's coming down here. Remember,
Huh?
very critical
My
point.
relatives.
But-
So it's relative. Theory of relativity.
they're unstable. Yeah.
Theory of relativity.
They're unpredictable is the right word. No, there's a very important point here. I've made it several times. I want to say it again. And because I know, because it could throw you off, because he keeps like, why don't you just stick, you said this already. It's like, well, okay, again, let's get tzaddik. Because remember, the interface is also relentless. It's constantly, as much as this is defined, the fact of the matter, it's also not defined. And if it gets too defined, it's trouble.
Stuck. You're in one.
Right, so that's why you'll always see, if you really go through everything, you'll see consistently, Eir is Ayin, Keli is Yesh, and then suddenly Keli has a little Ayin in it, and Eir is a little Yesh in it. And Eir itself in the Ayin, there's 3 levels in Ayin. And you're always back and forth. And if you think about childishly, you say, which one is it? It's correct, it is Svetzavum. And that's not a dismissive statement, that's actually the profundity of it. It's constantly moving. So I think a good example is a human being. Look, someone say, you were just here, now you're here. That's the story of mobility, of life and the movement of it. So in the whole interface of it, it's critical all the time. When you finish here, you say, who needs Chetzein Sakelim? It's complete gvul. Then you find that Chetzein Sakelim Atzilus, and 1 second, his potential So it's a constant process. Like you keep asking, like because you had the map in your mind. So that's Chachmas Tamah. So now suddenly you're talking about this. Remember, every level has both sides. It's abstract side. Remember we spoke back many months
And
ago.
you'll never get it.
You will get it when you respect this.
Exactly.
No, it's when you don't look, you'll see.
The interface itself, you can't define. The interface
Close your eyes.
No, remember we learned the whole thing.
Definition.
Remember with Chochmah, he said Chochmah has the two opposites, Koyach HaFlo and Koyach HaYerida. So what's Chochmah? Someone asked you, what is wisdom? Does wisdom take you away from yourself and into a more like sense of awe of what's beyond you? Or is it concrete and tangible? The answer is both. It's two parts of it. So there's the part of Chochmah that is Ma, and the part of Chochmah that's Koyach Ma. So the same thing is in every level, ultimately everything has another side of it. That's what makes an interface. As soon as something loses the other side, the door closes, and you're at a dead end. So he has to have it open-ended on both ends. And that's really why he keeps going back and forth. That's why all these questions. So right, exactly. That's what makes it. It can move back and forth. It can continuously assume each property. Look, let's put it this way. Yoshi, if we were able to emulate Eir's Kalim, a Kali can become an Eir, and Eir can become a Kali. Then you got yourself real unity. So, the problem is we live in a world of concrete, I'm this and I'm not that. And that's not true.
Right.
You can be Velt and Elikus. Initially, we don't understand it that way. We see, it's a table, it's not a chair. It's material, not spiritual.
It's spiritual quantum mechanics.
Absolutely. No, but the problem is we get so quantum-like, and we suddenly say, "Oh, I got it already in quantum." But no, but you have to bring the quantum into the non-quantum reality. Remember, the macroscopic world has to begin to experience the quantum, and that's not so simple. Physicists haven't figured that out yet. How do you bridge the two?
Sense.
String theories.
Right, string theory.
Yeah, but you want to know something? I will submit that I think without Chassidus, they'll never figure it out.
Right.
Because if you don't refine the material,
That's why I sent you that book.
Absolutely.
okay, if you don't refine the material, you'll never be able to reach the
But
quantum.
refining the material, you're losing the some of the.
That's the point. That's why it has to be part of the Keli itself. That's why the Keli. Let's put it this way: we're not understanding real Gashmis when we think we can't turn it into spirit. The fact that Einstein said that E equals mc squared, that energy equals matter, that's unbelievable chiddush. But it's really basic principles. A equals Keli, but it doesn't begin that way. The fact of the matter is, when matter is in the shape of matter, it's matter right now. It's potential energy, and it's really energy package, whatever you want to call it. But you have to do something to turn it. For example, a piece of wood is energy. A piece.
Miss Avusen as that Z equal MC squared. Beautiful.
I wrote an article about this.
The coarseness of the earth becomes a Kali. E equals MC squared.
Right.
I wrote two articles on
It's an
Hanukkah.
amazing book on that, by the way. Have you ever seen that? So, the history of the equation equal MC squared.
I've seen that. Yeah. Yeah.
So deep. Chassidus so.
I wrote an article on
Goes
Hanukkah.
through every aspect of
Hanukkah,
because
the days also, containing all the different days of Shabbos, Eid, Nasakeh.
With personality. I mean, the history.
Yeah, I can send it. Send me an email. I'll send it.
Also, by the way, if you're ready on this, the Eitzer Chaim that says Mitchilo and then that's mamish. You can bring out the whole Einstein theory of E equals MC squared.
Absolutely.
In the words of the Eitzer Chaim. It's beautiful.
Absolutely.
Eitzer Chaim, whatever.
Or it's time.
Eitzer Chaim.
Also Eitzer Chaim.
It's also Eitzer Chaim, yeah, but in Likutei it brings from the Eitzer Chaim.
Right.
Likutei Torah, you said?
Likutei, the Bible.
Save Pasha B'Chukosei. The Sofis. It says Lahavan Iyim Asher Kosev Eitzer Chaim. That's what the Maimon.
And you go through it, you can mamish bring out the whole E equals MC squared theory in the words of the Eitzer Chaim. Beautiful.
But as the Rabbi says, what was Einstein looking for his whole life after that? Was the unified field theory.
Okay.
Which we know the answer to that. We know the answer to that.
We're smarter than Einstein, we know that.
Look, you know my theory on this?
We have unified
God played
I
dice
have a
with
theory on
the
this.
God played
My
dice
theory
with
is
the
like this.
universe.
If the observer influences what they see, so if the observer is not experiencing Achdus, so how could he ever find Achdus outside of him? The particles are sensing chaos inside of us, in dichotomy. So until you don't have Achdus between your Nefesh Elokis and Nefesh Habanis, between your... Right. You'll never find that type of, that's why they can't find it.
Who's
called
the meat?
the,
Who's the meat? It's the neshama.
He'll-
It's the neshama.
What do you think about that?
He'll shine, he'll.
In other words,
What's
unified
a
theory is
wild-
only
what's a wild
once you
thing?
become a moral, ethical person. And that scientists have not yet.
You can then, because your observation, the mere fact of
Because
observation.
when the particle looks at
reality.
somebody,
What is
a
that
scientist
term
and sees the
called?
guy in a low
Elder
life,
shine? What's-
the particle cannot find
It's
the.
mirroring, the particles are mirroring
Exactly.
what
Go say
the
that
outer
again.
observer.
What do you want to say that
Particles
again?
don't even exist.
If that, say that
Actually,
again?
the particles don't even exist until we look
No.
at it. Well, God looks at it, and God looks at it through us because we're part of God. And that's the whole thing. That's the.
No, what's that science?
That's the
The
guru.
observer
That's the
affects the
belief.
reality.
Reality.
What's that called? Something principle. It's a name.
Uncertainty principle
Yeah,
from
but it's
Heisenberg.
Heisenberg principle. And you're saying that, what are you, how are
That's
you
what got
relating
the
that?
blip.
You saying
Huh?
that
That was
the
Heisenberg.
Heisenberg principle.
No, that's
Different
The
Halo.
Heisenberg.
Heisenberg.
that turned to tragedy.
So you're saying unless you have Atzimus in yourself.
No, unless
People
you are
Atzimus-
an ethical person who's
Yes.
living up to you are what you teach.
Right.
The particles will never be able to find that type of harmony and unity. In other words,
The
morality,
particles outside
ethics,
you
you
or
see,
inside?
both.
That's a great path. That
Can't
includes
you
that
go to
morality
a
or get physics.
Those that have learned to
This is it.
I know,
What is that?
Exactly.
Okay, so let's continue. So Agam, so now he's going the other side of things. I'm just saying this because it helps a little navigate why he keeps going back and forth. So now he goes like this. You just said, Chetzein Sakeli is Magbil for outside of you, and Biyah, like the Dibur. Machshav is Magbil for yourself within. But now he goes back. And remember, let's not forget, we're still talking about Atzilus here. You know. And Atzilus, Agam, the closing Agbol, Rak Mashamang, Chutz, about Atzilus, Guf, Einu B'chinas Gvul Adayim. He's going to explain what that means. Why is it not Gvul in Atzilus? V'hainu shehein rak Keyach HaGvul. What we're talking about in Atzilus, the whole thing is only the power of creating the defined. The power of the defined, the potential of the defined. V'hu sha'apulu b'chinas Agbola, avul kol zman she'ein Peil, ein kam b'chinas Agbola b'Peil.
So from this perspective, when you say there's spheres, they're just kayak, not oil?
Let's finish. Let's finish reading. The function is limited and defined. But as long as he's not, in other words, as long as he's not creating biyah, you're not actually affecting the world beyond it. There's no hagbala yet. He's going to give the example. Look, this completes the picture in how Atzilus works. An example would be the power of movement of the hand. Just like a moving hand, the hand is mobile, so has the power to extend itself. It also has the power not to extend itself more than necessary, or more than a certain limit. So now it goes like this. The Misatkeichem is Pashut. Yochel is Pashut begins Blik Vul. From the perspective of the potential of a hand, let's say writing, it can extend itself, express itself unlimited. And now, of course, the parentheses, it doesn't mean Blik Vul Amiti. I know Blik Vul, the Ha'odam. So it's again relative.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's not God. It's talking about, but potentially, like for example, how many words can a human being say? The answer is it's unlimited in concept. The Poil is not unlimited because he only has that many years and only that many hours he's awake. Like this hand that's drawing can make all kinds of siyurim b'tmunis, shapes and images, different ones, and much larger letters. In other words, the fact that somebody, let's just talk from a very simplistic perspective. Let's say you didn't know the power of someone. You see a page, and someone tells you that I wrote it. A page of letters. You look at the letters, you say, okay, he knows how to write these letters. If you didn't know the power of writing, you'd say, maybe that's all he can do. Then suddenly you see I could write the same page with bigger letters, then with even bigger ones. So you realize that what you're seeing is only one expression of many, many possibilities. I mean, it's obvious to us but it's not necessarily obvious from the outside. You look at something, you can say maybe he's not capable of more. Remember we talked about Shem HaPa'ula and Shem HaTeyar. Shem HaPa'ula, you could argue, what you see is what you get. You see someone functioning this way, maybe he's not capable of anything more. The fact is, we come to learn that's not true. He's capable of a lot more. And remember what he said about Shem Elokim, HaKayach VaYechelis. He's capable of doing it so many different ways. It's almost the same aces that he's using. Because he says he could have created the world many different ways and all that. So in the Mashal, it's also like that. You can write all kinds of letters in all kinds of shapes and forms endlessly. Again, endless Lefia Adam, proportionate to the human being. The same hand that is drawing it can do it in so many different ways, also chooses, or you choose, that you should now, right now, I'm going to do it in this way. I'm not going to just scribble endlessly. I'm going to do it. I'm going to confine my writing or my drawing to a particular image. So the Keich HaMagbil can limit and define, and define how it should express itself, that it should be expressed in a defined way according to my will. So essentially, he's basically saying that a potential a faculty, in this case he's using the faculty of drawing, starting with Keich HaTenuah Shabiyad. Tenuah is not Keich HaTziyur. Keich HaTenuah is movement. But I guess he's applying Tenuah here into drawing. It's just not the movement around. Why do you call it Keich HaTenuah? Because it's the movement. It uses that a lot, Keich HaTenuah. Okay, so basically a faculty really you could say has two elements to it. It's it's a power to extend and it's a power to limit. And they're working together all the time. So there's the Keich HaMagbil, Keich HaSpashus, Keich HaMagbil. But Emesai Ba Hagbola, when can you call it defined? Not when you're looking at the hand before it's starting to draw. At that point, you don't yet know which way it's going to go. How he's going to define. Because Keich HaTenuah means the power to just move. Once you're beginning to actually effectuate and do the thing you want to do with the power of movement. But as long as he's not writing, that he hasn't written, or Isa or created something, but Peil Mamish, in actuality, ain't kan Hagbala. You cannot call that Hagbala, in context of the Hagbala that he's defined. You cannot call that finite. V'hu liyas shezel keich nafshi. And why is that? Because it's a keich nafshi. It's the faculty of the spirit. It's a spiritual faculty. Hakol b'keich hamispashut.
Which part of the spiritual faculty? They build the endless possibility?
Tenuah.
Tenuah itself.
Yeah, the keich Hagbala. At this point, it's a keich that's nafshi. I mean, basically, he's saying it's not a keich gashmi; it's a keich nafshi. If, for example, let's. I'm just thinking of an example. Is this a good example? Yeah, maybe. Let's say you fill up a pen has ink. You wouldn't call it that's gvul. That's not keich gvul. Yeah, you could write maybe 100 pages, 500 pages. At some point, that ink is running out. So there you call it not keich nafshi. That's a keich gashmi. And you put a certain amount of ink into the pen, and it's going to write. A certain amount of gas in your car, it's going to drive. Here, that's not the case. It's not like obviously a human being, as long as they're alive, they're not alive, they can't write. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about potentially while you're there, you can write and write and write and write. You're never going to run out of the power to draw. The power to draw is endless in the context of the human being, whereas like the ink in the pen is not. So it's a keich nafshi. So even the keich hagbala is a keich nafshi. Hakol b'keich hamispashut. So it's not like two forces. One defines, one limits, and one extends. The limit is part of the extension. The extension has power, and one of the powers of extension is how much to extend and how much not to. So in that state, before it's actually doing it, before it's actually drawing, or before you're writing, it's relatively bli gvul, or not keich gvul, not gvul. Right? I just shouldn't say bli.
What's the difference between the Yechelis and the Koyach in this case?
He doesn't distinguish Yechelis and Koyach here. Bichlal in Chassidus, Yechelis is much higher than Koyach. Yechelis is... Koyach is actually is some form of Metzias. Yechelis is complete potential. You say Yechelis Atzmus and Koyach Atzmus, Yechelis is higher. But it's not relevant here right now. No, the Nefesh is also Yechelis and Koyach. There's Koyach, remember there's Koyach Gluyim, Koyach Nalamim, Koyach Hiyulim, Koyach Atzmin, and there's Yechelis. If you really want to go.
What's that list?
5.
That was great. What is it?
You got 5 of it.
What's the most paniyas before?
And I'll tell you a little story with the Rebbe, and you really like it.
Before
Koyach is Gluyim.
First there's Yecholos, and then there's the first koach is
Up
what?
to down or down?
Gluyim, going bottom up. Gluyim,
Okay.
reveal.
Okay, right.
Nalamim,
Yeah.
Hiyulim,
Yulim.
no, Atzmin,
Yeah.
Within Koyach.
and then there's Yechelis, and that's still not the Neshama itself.
Yechelis like the coal,
Ability.
like the coal,
This is the
like a piece of gold.
capability to have the
You got
koyach.
like a piece of...
Koyach is ability, Yechelis is capability.
Yechelis. These are 4 koichos. and then above that is the yechelis.
Yechelis, what is it?
No,
Atzmin is, yeah.
Ability.
They use a coal.
Atzmin is the 4th koich.
Okay, what's that?
Coal
Fourth koich.
is a Yechelis.
Yulim? Nalamim?
No, but
Yulim.
Yulim?
What is the K on the
And the Rebbe wrote Itzke Gansberg,
The 5th level. The Pidyon.
in Tafshin Yud, Itzke Gansberg wrote to the Rebbe, it's
4
printed in the
koichos and then 1 yechelis.
He wrote to the Rebbe that the Rebbe has to become Rebbe. Yeah.
Who wrote it? I didn't hear it.
Itzke Gansberg. The Rebbe wrote, what can I do? To be a Rebbe, you have to be B'Shleimus and Keiches Agluim and Keiches Nalamim and Keiches Iyulim and Keiches Atzmin. And the Rebbe basically says, I know it myself, I'm not there. Which means that when he became Rebbe, he must have been there. Yeah. But he uses these expressions. I'm not all 5. He uses Keiches.
Or by becoming Rebbe, you got there.
Yeah, whatever. But the bottom line is he uses these expressions. I think he uses Keiches. Definitely Gluim, Nalam, Hiyulim. Atzmim, I don't think. I remember. It's an Igros Kaddish in that volume. The Rebbe wrote it like on the bottom of the left. It says, I don't have that from B'Shleimus and all of that. There's another level, but it doesn't say Chassidus. It's Keiches Nalamim that's lower than Keiches Gluyim. You know, somebody doesn't do anything.
At the end, koyach.
Yeah.
Completely doesn't do anything.
Anything before?
So now, do you answer questions on the email? About-
Yeah, you can.
What's the email?
You wrote me some, I didn't know which is simonmeaningfullife.com. So anyway, so let's go ahead and so it's Keich Kol B'Keich how do you gam kilei b'chinas gvul mamish? So therefore, it's not gvul mamish. You can't call it gvul mamish when it's in that potential state. The Keich HaMagbil, it's only the Keich HaMagbil. It's the power to create gvul, to the limit. The power to limit. But at that point, it's not yet limited as compared to the letter or the image on the page. Shapa'ulati B'Hagbola. It's the power to limit and make a pool of B'Hagbola. Now obviously we all understand that that's an element of gvul compared to, let's say, a hand can do that. If you're talking about a different organ or b'chlal something else, they can't even draw all together. So clearly it's all relative. And l'cheda seems to be that in a human being, before he actualizes, lo yesh is pashtus klal. There's no expression, no extension at all. The ain't a shayach hagbala, and it's not even shayach. It's not even capable of any type of limitation. But that's a l'cheda. He's not going to conclude that way. Ach be'emes, but in truth, yesh is pashtus v'gilu dekei chatnu gam kedim shepeil. That you can't say. In other words, he wanted to say go a step further even. In the thoroughness of the Rebbe Rashab, not leaving any stone unturned. He wanted to go to say that l'chedi can go even further. You could say there's no keich hispashtus, there's no hispashtus at all. There's no shaykh hagbala even. He says no, that's not correct. Because in truth, there's yesh hispashtus v'gili the keich hatunu gam kedim shapel. That even before he acts, there's already a some extension or some revelation of movement. That yesh nafkamina in keich hatnu begilei behelam. That's the proof. Every step of the way it doesn't let any step miss. The interface is going to be complete here before the Rebbe Rashab finishes, huh? This doesn't exist. You really do not find anywhere in Chassidus such thoroughness. Such bavarnish, it just doesn't exist.
This is English of Chassidus. It's like really taking Chassidus and like.
Why was it dangerous to print?
Look what's happening to us. He's laughing too. If we keep on going, Dr. Lang, I know, is going to get the Klis HaNefesh, and he's going to quit his job.
He's writing the great.
After a while, you start reading this, you start saying, "What am I doing in the Olam Hazeh?" You know.
The whole Kavanah is the Olam Hazeh.
I know that, but that's what he says. The aid is commanded, but it's not so simple. So that's halavai. So he says the proof he's making.
If it's so beautiful, how come nobody buys into
The
it?
Chinese.
What's the answer?
I think
What's the answer?
I'm trying to.
They're
How
buying
come no one is buying into
I
it?
They're
think-
Buddhist monks,
They
they
don't know.
keep their mouth
It's
shut.
hard to buy something you don't know
You gotta
about.
be able to teach.
Exactly. Because what are we
You
doing?
don't speak English? What's your problem?
No, Yossi,
You have to learn this.
Yossi,
Oh,
Yossi.
yeah.
When you bring from Dibur to Maisa to Nanheim Reid.
How come they never publicized it that much?
Is the product so beautiful?
How would you sell it?
I think the Syrians are very receptive now.
Egyptians too.
Okay, 1 second. So he's proving now.
What's the problem?
Yes.
Okay, he's proving now that even before it comes out into action, there's another level in Gvul here. He's bringing another level. It's not completely no Gvul, no Keich HaMagbil. Why? Because we see this, because there's a difference. If this movement is revealed or it's hidden. I'll give you now a good example here. Well, because when we see, like when there is any damage, any handicap, I guess, any defect in the hand. Let's say someone has a wound. You can't write. Finger is swollen or something happens. You can't use your fingers. So the koyach then is behelam. Harigam ozu chai, he's still alive. I'm sorry, no, the hand is still alive. Gam oz hu chai, the hand and the person is still alive. Hu behelam, but it's concealed. Ukshayad hi kitikuna, when the hand is healthy. Oz hakoyach hu begili shezeh b'chinas hispashtus gam she'ein nepoel. Then the koyach, the power, is revealed, and it extends, but it's not actualizing. So he's adding a new level here. That even before you're actually writing, so you can't call it gvul, but you can't call it completely, like we call it here, the ein shaykh hagbala. Because there's a level when God forbid the hand is wounded, or hurt or defective, that even that's not there.
So because that's not there,
What does that mean?
But there's like both.
What does that mean? That
why don't you say the fact that it's a hand is like well already?
No. I'll one second. Let me just say. Let me just finish reading this. I'll see
He
it.
said it before.
So Mace has the ultimate
Part of the expression.
Amazing.
not words.
והכיח המגביל, אם היה בבחינת גבול, ממש, היה צריך להגביל שהכיח התנועה. והכיח המגביל, אם היה בבחינת גבול ממש. This כיח המגביל, if it was actual גבול, היה צריך להגביל שהכיח התנועה. It should have limited the power of movement. וזה שהוא מגביל יש רק בפעולה, הוא מפני שהוא רק כיח המגביל לבד. על כן אין המגביל בעצם הכיח. I don't get this.
It's stopping it from going out, but it doesn't mean it's.
How did you learn it? You advanced students here.
Why
Tell me,
can't you
Nadia.
say
I'm waiting for you.
There's two different levels there.
Caesar, one second. I understand the thing with the wound that he's trying to bring out I'm really finished reading it to get the whole picture here. There's a lot of levels here. One second.
Actual movement.
Hold on. There's the... Okay, let's start from the bottom up. When you actually put a letter or a shape on paper, Pu'ula is Gvul. The hand that did it,
potentially.
before it did it, is really a hand that can extend many different ways, including limiting itself many different ways. So that's a Kayach HaMagbil, it's not Gvul yet, it's only a Kayach HaGvul. That's clear. Now, when it's in a state right before you're writing, it's closer to the Gvul than, for example, a wounded hand, or let's say someone was holding your hand, just for argument's sake. So they're holding your hand, you're more limited than when you're just about to write. So the fact that you call it limit, not really the limit, complete limit, that's why it's not shaykh to hakbala. Not shaykh is a wounded hand is not shaykh. Because obviously once we all know it could heal and then it'll be b'shaykh again. But let's say God forbid it doesn't heal. Let's say a person's hand gets when he can't write anymore. So theoretically a hand could write, but this hand no longer
Or a mace.
it remains only potential. So for example, a great artist who God forbid got hurt could maybe train someone else, but he will never with his hands ever write again.
It's amazingly opposite.
No, my point is, I'm saying it's just trying to explain that the contrast. That when you're in a state right before you write, and they don't have that limitation, you can't call it there's no gvul at all. It's closer to gvul because it's
Because is also there already.
yeah. There's a ispashtus there, just not b'poil. It's essentially a level of ispashtus